All right. Hi, everyone. I just want to take a moment to introduce you to my friend Jeff. This is Jeff. He is an author, a musician, a composer, a professor at York University. He teaches a course um, on music for health and well being. And I feel very honored to get to call him a friend of mine. And I'm really excited for you to meet him as well. And yeah, Jeff, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is
Yeah.
nice.
Thank you for being here. So, the idea behind what Jeff and I wanted to do with this little series of mini classes was to look at some of the ways in which we are pulled out of present moment awareness. Yeah. And in fact, in actuality, we spend, probably 99.99% of our time on a bit of autopilot, right? Not really in the moment, not really paying attention to what's actually going on. Yeah, we're caught up in thought. And so we wanted to look at when we notice we are caught up in thought, or when we notice we're not in the present moment, how can we come back? Yeah, what are the tools we have? What are the practices we can do to help us come back? So I wanted to ask Jeff to talk a little bit about this idea of shifting states, if you will, from the Buddhist perspective, because I know you have some interesting things to share there.
Sure. Shall I begin?
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you so much for the introduction. It's lovely to be here. And when I teach, there's this course I teach at York, Music for Health and Wellness. I like to call it Music for Health and Well-being. Um, and the students there, this is an idea that's introduced, a practice that I introduce, and it tends to have a lot of traction. It's an undergraduate class, so I love, teaching young minds, and it tends to work um, quite well for them. And it really is the challenge of how do we, they say, be positive, be happy. In our culture, we have this kind of demand on us to show up, and sometimes we have something going on in our life that's challenging, and so we might it's challenging in there's a Buddhist practice that talks about this challenge of moving from an agitated or negative state, a negative mental state, to a positive state, that's quite challenging and demanding on us. And it's much more reasonable and, in fact, easier to suggest to ourselves, to invite ourselves, to ask ourselves. We ask a lot of ourselves, as we know, to ask ourselves to move from an agitated state or a slightly negative state to a neutral state first. If we can get to a neutral state, then from there, it's so much easier to generate a positive mindset, a positive orientation toward handling life. And so this is a traditional practice, a traditional idea coming from about 1,500 years ago, actually. So I think you're going to lead us in a practice of this. Is that right, Simone?
I am going to lead us in a practice to look at this. And before we do that, I
Yeah.
just wanted to touch on this a little bit more, this idea of noticing you're in an agitated state.
Right.
Because I think this is something that happens to us like countless times in a day. Right? We just don't usually really notice. Yeah, we are driving our car and somebody cuts us off, and we have that moment of like, oh, how dare they? Or we're like standing in line and the line is not moving, and we feel that like flutter of, how long am I going to have to be here? I don't want to be here. I want to be anywhere else but here. Or we open up our email and there's an email from somebody with a really annoying subject line and whatever it is. Yeah. Like so many opportunities in this modern life to feel agitation. Yeah. Or if you live in Toronto, you come back to your car and you notice there's a parking ticket, which now costs $50. And you're like, why is this parking ticket
Yeah,
$50?
thank you for
Why?
mentioning all of these. Now I'm feeling quite agitated.
So even when we're, practitioners who are practicing yoga and mindfulness and meditation, there are countless opportunities in the real life to practice. And I think, Jeff, like you were saying before about how there's this notion that we should be happy or we should be joyful, we should be content. And there's so much pressure in our culture to exude these positive emotions all the time. Yeah. And in a way, even if we look at the yoga world, sometimes we encounter this attitude that, well, because you practice yoga, you shouldn't experience anger, or you shouldn't, you should be happy all the time, or you should never get sick, or something like this. And really, I think that's a bit of spiritual bypassing that we're, maybe going to go into in another session, because the reality is that we're all human. And we have to manage our human experience out in the world with all of the challenges that we face. And so, in my mind, the practice is not in the not experiencing these negative emotions, it's in the recognition of what we're experiencing in the moment in which we're experiencing it. Does that resonate for you, Jeff?
Yeah, bringing awareness. There's a wonderful similar. I can just bring in something very briefly that the one idea is to have a sentry, like a guard, at the doorway of the mind. So you're watching the thoughts coming in. You're almost like a gatekeeper. This is a wonderful practice that can be done also. But part of it is, yeah, as you say, recognizing, noticing, oh, you know, I've been for the last few minutes off. I'm not how I was a few hours ago when I had my first coffee of the day and I was all about it, and things were happening. Something's going on. Oh, I know what it was. It was when so and so said something. I was triggered. Oh, okay. So you can choose at that moment, right? The guard at the doorway of the mind can choose, okay, am I going to invest energy into this? Or can I let that go, deal with it later, and refine that place uh, of, let's say, homeostasis, or kind of a natural, more accepting way, beyond the agitation. Um, so yeah, that's one way of recognizing.
I love that, Jeff. This gateway on the mind, this idea, this gatekeeper.
It's not my idea. It's Shantideva from the 8th century, this
Okay.
Buddhist master who spoke about this. Yeah,
Well,
it's
thank you
very.
for sharing it with us.
Mhm.
Maybe you can send me some more information about it and I can include it in the notes on this.
Absolutely.
Anyways, so I'm going to take us on a practice in a moment. And I and I just want to reiterate quickly that the practice is the recognition that we are experiencing agitation or irritation or anger or overwhelm, frustration, whatever it could be, whatever negative emotion it could be in any moment. Yeah. A recognition that something has taken us away from homeostasis. And now that we've recognized we're not in a neutral state, coming back to neutral. Okay, so the practice we're going to be doing now is going to be all about coming back to that neutral state. And this
I
is a
love you.
slightly,
I
sorry,
was gonna
Jeff.
It's almost like, I was thinking, oh, it's like baby steps, but these are not. These are actually adult steps. Like these, we need to, just like we might be off our game in some way, emotionally, we might
Yeah.
notice, and then you're going to show us how to bring us back. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no. Yes. These are adult steps. This is very much a grown-up practice, I think. I experience, because It's the coming off of the autopilot. Yeah? It's the paying attention. Okay, so let's do the practice now. And then when the practice is over, we'll come back together and we can maybe talk very briefly about how it felt for you. So, Jeff, I'm going to ask you, maybe you're going to do the practice. I'm going to lead it. So you can take yourself off camera for the practice. And I'm going to just invite you now. So, take you, Jeff, you can go ahead and mute yourself and take yourself off camera. There we go. So find a nice, comfortable seat. So sit up on some height, a block, a blanket, something underneath your sitting bones, and root down into the sitting bones, lengthen up through the spine. You can soften your gaze or close your eyes, whatever feels better for you. And I'm going to invite you now to bring to mind something that you find irritating, a mild irritation. So, not the most frustrating, annoying thing that you have to deal with, but something maybe a little less significant. If we were to put it on a scale, 10 being the most horrifying, frustrating experience you could think of, we're looking for something in the sort of 3 to 4, maybe 5 range. So, just bringing to mind whatever this irritation might be for you right now. And really go into it for a moment. Feel it. Yeah, bring it into your body and see if you can notice if it takes on a specific location in your body, maybe in your throat or your belly, or heaviness in your chest. And just see if you can locate it physically in your body and feel the sensation associated with this thing you find irritating. And if there's a word that comes to mind that you associate with this feeling, or if there's a visualization or a color, and just notice those things now. What comes to you when you feel this irritation, this frustration? And we'll just stay here for another few breaths, feeling into that. And now we're going to begin to shift our focus by bringing our awareness simply to the breath. We're not doing anything special here at first. We're just going to watch the gentle rise and fall of the breath as you inhale and exhale. And breathing in and out through the nose to the best of your ability if you can. Not doing anything special with the breath, but seeing if you can just notice sensation associated with the breath. Maybe it's the sensation of the rib cage expanding and releasing, or air moving in and out through the tip of the nose. And now we're going to start to smooth the transitions from inhale to exhale, from exhale to inhale, making those transitions nice and smooth. You could imagine your breath is like a gentle wave-like pattern, rising and falling. There's no strong peaks or valleys, nice rolling hills. Nice smooth transitions from inhale to exhale. and from exhale to inhale. And now we'll begin to make the inhalation and the exhalation about the same length. So inhaling for about 3 to 4 seconds and exhaling for about 3 to 4 seconds. And if a slightly longer breath feels better for you, then that's totally fine. I'm just making the inhalation and the exhalation about the same length. Inhaling for about 3 to 4 and exhaling for about 3 to 4 seconds, or a slightly longer breath if that feels better. And then we'll start to make the exhalation slightly longer than the inhalation. Inhaling for about 3 to 4 seconds and exhaling for about 5 to 6 seconds. And if a slightly longer breath feels better, then that's fine. Just making the exhalation slightly longer than the inhalation. Inhaling for 3 to 4 and exhaling for 5 to 6. We'll add now a brief pause at the end of the exhalation. So we'll inhale for about 3 to 4, exhale for about 5 to 6 seconds, and then pause the breath for 1 to 2 seconds. Inhaling for 3 to 4, exhaling for 5 to 6, and pausing the breath for 1 to 2 seconds. Inhaling for 3 to 4, exhaling for 5 to 6, and then pausing the breath for 1 to 2 seconds. Now you can let your breath just return to its natural rhythm, not trying to do anything special, just letting the breath flow in and out through the nose easily. And just taking a moment here to notice how you feel right now. in this moment, right here, right now. Has anything shifted? What is present for you right now? And when you're ready, you can bring your hands together in front of your heart, rubbing your hands together, creating some heat in between your hands. And we'll cup the hands over the eyes and let the eyes open if they're closed. And then slowly releasing the hands. All right. Thank you for sharing that practice with me. Jeff, I'm going to invite you to come back on camera if you're ready and turn on your mic. And Jeff, I'd love to hear from you how that felt.
Well, first of all, thank you so much.
Mm.
Um, that was very skillful. I thought that the way you had us breathe, on the count of three in and the count of three out, that's what happens when we're agitated. We're not comfortable. We have a restricted, it's almost like we feel something pressing on us. Do you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so I thought that, and then expanding that to a count of, five or six, that felt like a release. And you, I think, guided us in what actually happens. But you brought us to be aware of that dynamic that we get into. Without much awareness, we just get into something because we're triggered, we're off, something has happened. And I brought to mind something that is challenging for me right now. And I haven't known quite how to deal with it. But it wasn't, it was a level five as you instructed. And then I felt like there's space. I then felt there was space to deal with that. So it did work. It brought me to a much more neutral state about that issue. And I think that's a really effective breathing technique, quite honestly. I think you did it really well. So I appreciate that you just introduced something into my practice that I'm going to try a few times.
Hmm.
See if see if it continues to stick because it worked. It was good. That was
Amazing.
that was my impression. So I just want to thank you. I'd be curious to hear from others.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll invite them on in a sec. Well, thank you for sharing your experience, Jeff. I really appreciate that. And I'm curious, this is one type of breath practice. I'm just curious to hear, Jeff, if there are any other practices that you do briefly.
Yeah, there is this, this the way I usually introduce it and the practice that I suggest is I say, imagine there's a possibility. Imagine that there's a possibility that you could experience a shift from what we're about to do. And just by imagining that possibility, imagine you could shift 2% more toward relaxation, 3%. Invite, and just having that thought tends to open up a little. Okay, I can go 2% toward being more neutral. And then the practice of the ancient Kadampa masters is to focus on the the breath, one full breath in and out is, and then at the end of that breath, whether you're focusing on the air passing at the tip of the nostrils or your diaphragm, your stomach expanding or contracting, right? As we breathe, just breathing naturally and just noticing that full breath without distraction. And at the end of that breath in and all the way out, saying to yourself quietly, just in your mind's ear, this is the first breath. And what the masters say is that sometimes getting all the way in and out with a natural breath, it might, without any other thought coming in, just to focus only on one thing, the breath.
Hmm.
Just to do that, you might have to go 50 times, 100 times before you can say honestly, right? This is the first breath. The first breath, meaning the first breath that I was able to fully focus on only breathing. And if you can get there, full inhalation and exhalation, congratulations, and you can go on to the next breath. And if you can get to this is the second breath, that's a huge achievement. It takes months actually
Yeah.
to be good at that.
Yeah. I love that. I really love that practice because I think, when you develop some skillfulness in this, you can shift your state in one breath, I believe.
Mhm.
I believe. I have moments, maybe it's depends on the level of agitation, but with the minor irritation, like if I remember to, I can bring myself back to neutral, sometimes in 1 to 2 breaths, which I think is, I don't know.
Yeah, you might be better than me. It takes what I do is I visualize. So because of my practice, I visualize, Tara, or I visualize some very beneficent, empowering energy as an aid, helping, supporting.
Right.
I find that to be powerful personally. And then that helps me open up, feel more secure, feel
Yeah.
more safe, and it opens up. Probably it's around 3 or 4 breaths for me, quite honestly.
Well, 3 or 4 breaths is pretty great. Okay, I just being mindful of the time. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for sharing your time with us today, and all of you for watching this. And we'll meet next week to share another practice, to share a different practice related to sound. We're not going to talk more about it now because we don't have time, but we'll meet next week and we'll send out the links for that as well. Okay, so I'm going to end recording now. So thank you all. We hope to see you again next week.